Welcome to episode 45 of the Bass Shed podcast. My name is Ryan Roberts. Hey folks, on the episode is Chuck Kreinar. Chuck Kreinar is the brother of bassist Bob Babbitt, Motown legend. Known for his work in Detroit with the Temptations, with Smokey Robinson, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder. Then he moved on. He played with Phil Collins. He did session player, but after Motown split, he went to the East Coast, went to New York, then down into Nashville. We're going to talk about all this, but we're going to talk about it with his brother, Chuck Kreinar. And this is going to be the first of a two-part tribute to Bob Babbitt. And I'll be speaking with Bob Babbitt's brother, Chuck, and Bob Babbitt's son, Joe Kreinar. And we will talk about that a little bit more in a second. D. Lakin Basses, founder of Lakeland Basses, Dan Lakin, has a new company, and I'm honored to be a part of the D. Lakin family. I co-designed a 5-string fretless with Dan and his design team. That bass is inspired by Ryan Roberts bass. The number is the 5-6035. I spoke with Dan last week. That bass is off to be routed and painted. Actually, I spoke with him last week about that. That's when he told me that. I spoke with him earlier today, actually. And I'm like, dude, what do you think about a matte finish, huh? Like, I'm kind of into the matte finish. Dan Lakin was not a fan of the matte finish. Yeah, what he had to say about it, I'm not going to repeat on the mic, but it was hilarious. So that bass is underway. Dan is also doing a bass giveaway, and the first prize is your custom bass. The first prize winner will connect with Dan and the design team, and they will build you the bass of your dreams. Stop by www.dlakenbasses.com to learn more about how to enter. Also, check out Dan's Amp Shop. 5 brands you can't get on Sweetwater or at Guitar Center: Demeter, Trickfish, DNA, Gensler, and Epiphany. Personally, I'm a fan of Epiphany. I play them. Love it. I did play Gensler on a gig a couple weeks ago in Seattle. I played their heads. Fantastic. That was the first time I played a Gensler head, and no issues. I had a good time with it, and I used it on upright and electric. So that's my time spent with Gensler. You can get those from Dan's Amp Shop. Go to www.dlakenbasses.com. All products have a 30-day guarantee, and Dan will pay for shipping both ways. If you are a double bassist, you will want to check out Lemur Music, everything for the double bass. Head to lemurmusic.com. I've been a customer of Lemur Music since I started playing the upright, and I'm honored to have partnered with them. I'll be sharing more about that probably on the next episode. Later this week, I'm headed down to Lemur to meet with the folks there and exchange some information that I will be talking about on the next podcast. To let you guys know about the partnership I have with Lemur. But go to www.lemurmusic.com for all your double bass accessories, strings, sheet music, and more. lemurmusic.com. The Bass Shed website is dedicated to the artistry of bass legends and how we can broaden a stylistic vocabulary by learning and analyzing the work of these legends. I also get emails regularly about folks wanting to study privately with me. So if you're not quite into doing the transcription thing, although I'm a big advocate for it, honestly, I transcribe a lot. That's kind of the nature of what's up on the website right now, is just the transcriptions and all the analysis of it. But if you want to learn some other things, some technical things, some theoretical things, some conceptual approaches to improvising, shoot me an email at ryan@thebassshed.com. I am offering a free trial lesson with every lesson sign up. If you're not feeling it after the trial, all good. Let me know, and I will reimburse you for the lesson that you did sign up for. But hit me up at ryan@thebassshed.com. Let me know what you're working on. Let me know what you'd like to be working on. Or you can visit thebassshed.com/private-lessons. All right, as I mentioned on the episode today is Chuck Kreinar. Chuck Kreinar is the brother of studio bassist and Motown legend Bob Babbitt. Bob Babbitt's birth name was Robert Kreinar. So Chuck is his blood brother. And the way this came about is I got an email from Chuck. Chuck, and Bob Babbitt's son, Joe Kreinar, had come across the bass shed, and Chuck emailed me just simply saying, like, hey, I'm Bob Babbitt's brother. Noticed you had some stuff about him on the bass shed. Just checking it out. Cool. I quickly emailed Chuck back and like, man, this is fantastic. I'd love to talk to you. I got the chance to talk to him on the phone, just kind of checking in and just meeting him. And the same thing happened with Bob Babbitt's son, Joe. Just had both actually pretty long conversations, hour and a half, 2 hours, somewhere in there with each of them. And just learning about their brother, Chuck's brother, and Joe's dad, Bob Babbitt, and hearing stories and just covering different attributes of Bob. And so I decided to have both of them on a 2-episode tribute to Bob Babbitt. Bob Babbitt is one of my favorite bass players. And we discuss a lot. Me and Chuck discuss the family history. I really got curious about kind of the cultural influence of the family, and I talk about that more towards the end of my talk here with Chuck. We talk about the musical environment that was happening at the house while Chuck and Bob were growing up. We talk about Bob's early influence, Bob's move to Detroit. Chuck shares stories about Bob being on the road with Stevie Wonder and stories about Bob with Smokey Robinson. And it's fantastic. There's just a lot of great stuff here, and Chuck is all heart, and it's such a pleasure to connect with him. And Chuck, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Chuck is all heart, and Joe is all heart, and I can only imagine that Bob was all heart. And from listening to their accounts of their time with Bob Babbitt, absolutely was just all heart. And we can clearly hear that and feel that in his playing. So this is the first episode of a 2-part tribute to Bob Babbitt. And this is my talk with Bob Babbitt's brother, Chuck Kreinar.
You're an early starter, man.
I normally wouldn't be. I can't remember the last time I woke up this early. No, the last time I woke up this early was a couple weeks ago. I had a gig in Seattle, and we had to be in the lobby to leave Seattle at 5:45.
Oh, gee.
And that was brutal. Then I got home after the flight. I got back to LA and just slept all day. So I'll probably go back and take a nap after this.
If I got up that early, I'd be napping.
Yeah.
Sometime during the day.
Yeah. How's it going over there in Chapel Hill, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
What's it like over there?
Since last August.
Okay. Where were you at before that?
Northern Virginia, an area called Woodbridge, about 20 miles south of D.C.
Okay.
And there a long. God, we're there since 72, 73.
Okay. You worked in the airline industry, right? So is there a lot of industry in Northern Virginia for that?
Right. Well, our headquarters was in DC, at the DC airport.
Okay.
Washington National Airport, which is really in Virginia.
Oh.
Even though it's called Washington National.
Yeah.
But most folks, we had a big operation in Pittsburgh, so most folks thought that was our headquarters, but it was D.C.
Yeah, getting into Pittsburgh. You were born in Pittsburgh, correct? Were you born?
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Yes. Ended up going coincidentally. I got into sales, and my first job was in Detroit.
Okay. I can already see the parallels to your brother here.
Really?
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we both went to Detroit after we got out of high school.
Okay. So let's start. We'll come back to that.
I will tell you that my father was born in Slovakia.
Yeah.
And when he came to his last name was very confusing. Typical European spelling.
Okay.
So that he had his name changed. So I always said he changed his name from a confusing Slovakian name
Yeah.
to a confusing Americanized name.
What was the given name? What was the original Slovakian name?
It's pronounced Kreinar,
Okay.
but the spelling is off the wall.
Sure.
It's like I wouldn't even try.
Yeah.
And the bizarre is that one of his brothers changed his name differently. He had a different last name than I.
That's funny. That's funny only because of your brother changing his last name professionally.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so there's already some family parallels there that are happening generationally. So when did your parents move here to the States?
Well, they were always, I shouldn't say they were always here. My mother was born in the States.
Okay.
Her parents were both from Budapest, Hungary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my father was born in Slovakia.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then he came here at what age?
Well, I was born. Oh, his age? He was in his teens.
Okay.
He didn't get his U.S. citizenship, which I have, excuse me, the certificate of his citizenship until he was 30.
Oh, wow.
Took a while.
Okay. Yeah. And so your mom and dad, they meet, and there was 4 children, correct?
Yes.
There's 4 of you.
3 boys and a girl.
Yeah. And so Bob was the oldest.
Oldest. I was next. Then our sister was the third, and our brother was the youngest, the fourth.
Okay. Okay. Cool. And so in the house, your mother was would listen to a lot of Hungarian classical music.
Yes. Yeah. She was a singer and a performer.
Yeah.
She performed in Hungarian musical theater.
Okay.
My father sang too, but he wasn't as good as my mother.
Sure. Sure. So then your mother was a performer. So what were some of your early memories going to these performances?
Well, she was a performer before she was married, and maybe a little bit after. So I was too young. I never saw any of her performances.
Okay.
Except we had a local park called Kennywood, an amusement park.
Yeah.
And one of the promotions they had were annual nationality days.
Okay.
Hungarian Day, Italian Day, German Day. So she always performed, and I did see her then perform at Hungarian Day. Okay.
Okay. So that was that culture was relevant in your household in a big way. Like it was very, your mom, was really kind of proud of that Hungarian heritage.
Yeah, a lot of music. My mother had and I guess my father too had a huge collection of Hungarian records. That were always playing, always on.
Yeah.
And, we heard it. We grew up with that music as young children. Okay.
And then did your mom also play piano too to accompany herself?
Well, later in life, she played, not in the beginning. She learned. Well, after our father passed away, she would have been probably in her 40s.
Yeah.
When I bought her a piano, and she learned and was able to play the rest of her life.
Just self-taught. Did she take lessons?
I'm not certain. I wasn't around when she was learning. Okay. I don't know if she taught herself or actually had lessons. I have a feeling she had lessons.
Okay.
She more than likely did. Her best friend was a piano player.
Oh, okay.
Another Hungarian lady.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
She probably learned from her.
Yeah. Getting in, you told me this story initially of Bob studying and practicing late in the kitchen to what they would call back then race music.
Yes.
Was that also played when Bob wasn't practicing to it? Was that music played around the house?
Not so much. Not like Hungarian music, because he was the only one. Well, I listened to it also.
Sure.
But that music was on in the wee hours of the morning after the whole family had gone to bed. he'd turn the radio on we had in our kitchen, close the door, and practice his bass with that music.
I love that story.
But it was a kind of music we both definitely both liked.
Yeah.
And I would listen to that station during the day.
Okay. And roughly what year was that?
Would have been mid-50s.
Okay.
Yeah. My sister had a boyfriend who was a DJ, and he gave me a couple of cassettes of music from that era, and you would not recognize any of the group names.
Really?
Most of them were like one-hit wonders.
Sure. Sure.
Crazy names.
And so your brother's playing that, and then you never kind of followed in his footsteps. He started playing the bass, and you didn't necessarily pick up a musical instrument, or did you a little bit?
I tried in school.
Okay.
In middle school, 7th grade, I tried the clarinet.
Okay.
But I was totally non-musical. I always said I played at it.
Yeah.
Not on it.
How about the other siblings?
My younger brother, he also played clarinet, and he was a little more into it.
Yeah.
He had his own. He bought his own clarinet. I never did.
Okay.
And my sister, I know she played violin. In the Pittsburgh school system, there were music classes starting in middle school, which was the 7th through 8th and 9th grade.
Okay.
And she tried the violin, but I don't think she stuck at that too long.
Sure.
Well, my son is musically inclined, and he took the violin for a year when he was in 6th grade. Just decided to get started in music with the violin, but he really wanted to play the drums. So as he switched to drums next year, he's an excellent, very good drummer. And up through, he's in his 50s now. Okay. He's played with various groups, not seriously, professionally, but just as a hobby. Yeah. Pastime. Okay. He still has a set of drums.
Nice. Nice. So we're in the mid 50s. Bob is practicing the bass in the kitchen, and then it was after he got out of high school. Well, around this time, you guys were both doing construction, correct?
Yes, with our father, who was plaster construction. Bob worked more with my father than I did. Okay. He worked for like at least 3 of when we were on vacation in the summer. He worked with our dad, and I worked about 1 year. Okay. Bob worked at least 3 years with him. Yeah. Yeah. Did Bob and your father have a really tight relationship? Pretty much, yeah. And I think Bob picked up he was a hard worker. Yeah. Dedicated to music. Sure. As our father was, very capable, adept at his job. Yeah. So I think Bob picked up some of that from her dad. Okay. Okay. And so he's kind of learning that trade. And then she does it for 3 years and then moves to Detroit. Right. And you follow him to Detroit not too long after. Correct. Yeah. But now when he's in Detroit, is he plugged into the music scene right away, or did it take him some time to get acclimated and find some musicians when he gets to Detroit? I'm not sure, Ryan, exactly how quickly, but I knew very quickly. I don't know how quickly after he got there. He got with a group of guys who all lived in the same neighborhood, and they were musicians, and they formed a band. Yeah. And I think that maybe it was the Counts. Yeah. So that was pretty soon after he got there. Okay. Okay. Then how long had he been to Detroit before you got there? probably about 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, because he graduated in 1955 and I graduated in 57.
Okay.
We both went. I really went there just to visit, to hang with him for a little while. I figured maybe a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Well, our uncle had gotten him the job in construction in the first place up there in Detroit.
Okay.
I'm saying up there.
Yeah.
And they got me the job in construction, working same job for Bob, same company. So I stayed. I was there for a couple of years. And then I came back to Pittsburgh eventually.
Okay. Had you ever had talks with your brother about he spent all this time working in construction and he's kind of a musician and he's meeting musicians on the side. Was he being really proactive about becoming a professional musician, or was he kind of just doing it on the side and he might have done construction as a profession?
No, he did it. He did it with the interest of playing it for his career.
Okay.
He loved it. He was into it, and he played as much as possible during the evenings.
Yeah.
With different groups. I mean, when he started with the Counts, and then one day he's in Detroit and he walks past. I don't know what kind of facility it was. But the Royal Terms were in existence then, the band. He heard them playing, and he goes in, introduces himself, and they didn't have a bassist, so they hired him.
Okay.
And he played with those guys for at least 3 years.
Yeah.
And they charted. Well, they recorded 11 or 12 songs, and about 7 or 8 of them charted.
Okay.
And of course, they played before, and they backed up. They got a session job with Popular guy out of Michigan, and I apologize.
That's all right.
His name is escaping me. I've heard it a gazillion times. Anyway, he became a touring band and his touring band. And My Little Town Flirt was one of his big hits.
Little Town Flirt?
Say again?
What was one of his big hits?
Little Town Flirt.
I'm going to look it up right now and see if I can look it up while we're on the.
I apologize.
No, don't worry about it. Little Town.
Del Shannon.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, they played on several of his big hits, and plus, as I said, Jordan.
Yeah, and so that now at this point, your brother's getting kind of a taste of it. He's on the charts. He's playing with this group, Del Shannon, who's a huge name at that time period.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I think "Runaway" is Del Shannon's biggest hit.
Yes, I think so too.
But I remember that song even from when I was a kid. Like I can still hear that opening guitar to "Runaway," and that was the song that kind of got me into Del Shannon. And then I started listening to more of it. But I never thought about who his band was. And it was funny learning from you that Bob was there, and that was him on some of those old ones.
Well, that relationship and that experience recording with Del really led him to do much more, and then for sure try to develop that as his career.
Yeah,
and I believe he stopped working at the construction job.
Okay, so he was staying busy enough with Del.
Yeah, he spun off from that and began recording with all the studios in Detroit.
Yeah,
except for Motown.
Right. Were they even around yet?
They had started.
Okay.
Yeah, they were in business at that time.
Yeah.
He literally, on a lot of the gigs he played, as a lot of people have heard, were with the Funk Brothers from Motown.
Sure.
Who were doing jobs outside of Motown, which they weren't supposed to do.
Right.
They talk about that in the documentary, Standing in the Shadows of Motown, how they got they were told they were going to be fired.
Right,
And
right.
there's a funny scene from, I forget which one of the musicians said he was going to be fired twice because they cut him twice.
So your brother's playing with Del Shannon, and then I know it's Stevie Wonder who your brother Bob started playing with Stevie and was doing some road work with Stevie Wonder. And it was
Yes.
Stevie that brought him into Motown as a studio musician.
Yes, correct. Well, he got started working with Stevie because Barry Gordy bought Golden World Studios, where Bob was recording and was under contract with the Golden World. So he automatically became a Motown employee when Motown bought Golden World Studios. And
Right.
his first job was backing Stevie on his touring band.
Yeah, super early on in Stevie must have been, 17?
He was still in high school.
Yeah.
They only toured during the summer.
Right.
When Stevie was off school.
Right.
It's one of the funny stories is they were touring in a van, and there was a gig they were playing in Baltimore, and they had parked the van in a road that accessed the arena. And Stevie got in the driver's seat and asked Bob to teach him to drive. But yes, when Stevie started recording, the first thing he did, he invited Bob to play with him on. They did a Beatles cover song on "We Can Work It Out," and then somehow I got a little mixed up. Of course, he then subsequently recorded "Signed, Sealed, Delivered."
Yeah.
And Bob was puzzled by Stevie had him record that instead of Jamerson. And he mentioned it to Jack Ashford when Jack said, "Let's Stevie like your song."
And it was just that simple. That's interesting. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of another Stevie tune that Bob played on.
I don't believe he did either.
It was just Signed, Sealed.
You're right. He did not.
Yeah. Obviously, the stuff with Marvin Gaye, he did multiple tracks.
Did a lot with the Temps, and of course he did Smokey's "Tears of a Clown."
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great one. That's one of my favorites that doesn't get as much of attention. As much as Signed, Sealed or Mercy, Mercy Me. Tears of a Clown's a great song. Yeah, Bob sounds great on it.
It was a kind of side story, which wasn't too happy a story. Bob and the group, the Funk Brothers, were playing for, I forget who the producer was. And all the musicians, probably it was heading this issue, wanted to get a raise in how much they were being paid.
Yeah.
For each song they played. So Bob goes to the producer and asks if they can get a raise. That they'd all appreciate it and would like to have it. It was a small amount. They weren't paid a lot of money for a song back then. Well, that producer went to the other musicians and asked them if they agreed with that, if they wanted more money on each song.
Mm-hmm.
And they chickened out.
Really?
Yeah. And they said no. So that producer fired Bob. When Smokey heard about it, Smokey came to his rescue.
Really?
He said, "No, keep him. Do not fire him."
Oh, that's awesome. Man, I never heard that one. So it was right around that time from what year roughly was this? Was this around the year of Tears of a Clown?
It would have been like about 1970.
Okay.
Thereabouts, give or take.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of when that little revolution was happening in Motown Records with the musicians wanting credit on the albums and wanting more money and to kind of get some salary pay. And I've read about what Jamerson was getting financially after that. But then it wasn't too much. It was only a couple years later that Motown would move to LA.
Right.
And
72, I think.
Yeah, I think it was 72. And your brother Bob didn't. Bob went back to the New York area.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the sessions he played before he joined Motown were for producers who came east with their artists.
Okay.
And knew they could get the Funk Brothers backing up their songs.
Yeah.
So a couple of the producers, when they knew that Bob wasn't going out to L.A. to follow Motown, told him to come east. And they would get him work. And they sure did.
Yeah. And then, so how long? Let's go back to Detroit for a second. So you and your brother are both in Detroit. And how long did you live there? Because you weren't there as long as Bob was.
Oh, no. I went there in 57 and I came home 2 years later.
Okay.
It was just the beginning, the end of 59.
Okay.
Because I got a job right away in Pittsburgh in 60.
Okay. In the airline industry.
I'm sorry?
In the airline industry?
No, at that time it was a brand new Hilton hotel that opened up in Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
I was in the military. I was in the National Guard and was called on to active duty. And I couldn't go back to the job in the hotel, so I got the job in the airline industry in 63.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got into sales, it was 66 that I was sent to Detroit to be the sales manager.
Okay.
And, but it was great being there for some reasons, although otherwise it was a tough tour of duty. The weather was horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
The winters were terrible, and also the riots occurred at that time. So I was only there a couple of years, and then I transferred to Philadelphia.
Okay. Did you get some time to hang with Bob while you were there again, or were you guys just both kind of busy professionally?
Well, I was going to say, we were both so busy, him with his music, me with my job. We spent very, very little time together during those 2 years that I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it couldn't happen.
Sure. I mean, I get it. Even with all the technology now, like my brother lives a couple miles from me, and we don't see each other that often.
Right.
Even with all the ways there are to connect and stuff, we're both just busy. So I can only imagine what it would have been like back then without all the technology and ways to connect. Mm-hmm. Was your brother playing live around Detroit during these areas, or was he mainly just in the studio?
Mostly studio.
Okay.
Very little live at that time.
Yeah.
A lot of it live when it was with Royal Tones.
Yeah.
They were a very popular group playing clubs constantly.
Okay.
Always drew good crowds. And that's before, that's when I was first there.
Yeah.
From 57 to 60.
Okay.
I would go out and watch them every time I could, attend their practices. I had a lot of time to spend with him during that phase.
Did your brother ever speak to having a preference about playing in the studio versus playing live? Did he prefer one over the other?
Never heard him say that he did.
Okay.
I have to believe once he started playing in the studios and his reputation got around, he probably preferred that. I don't think he had time to play with groups.
Sure.
At appearances, he was doing so much recording.
Yeah.
I think at one of Tara Sherman's studios used him so much they put a cot in his studio so he could sleep
Yeah.
over.
That's crazy. That's crazy. It's like a doctor or something, just going to sleep it off for a couple hours before back to work.
Right, exactly. That's what happened.
That's insane. So now you're in Detroit, and it's what years did you just say? 66, 67?
For me?
Yeah.
Oh no, it was yes, 66 through 68.
Okay, 68.
Yeah, right.
So your brother's staying busy at Motown. When he goes back to the East Coast and to New York, where were you living then? Because that happens when Motown Records breaks up in 72. Bob goes back to the New York area. Where were you at that time? Where were you in 72?
Then, well, from 68 through 72, I was in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And then at some point in time in 72, I want to say it was earlier in the early half of the year, I transferred down to Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
72. And I was there for the rest of my career.
Yeah.
Until I retired.
Yeah. And then, but Bob was kind of all around there. He was in New York, then he went down into Nashville. So he was kind of all around that.
I forget what year it was. And what caused him to move was the fact that a lot of the music, as you well recall, turned to not the instruments, not live.
Yeah,
recorded stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So that caused him to just go elsewhere to another music capital.
What would it is? Maybe like 80s, early 80s, when like all the synthesizers really started coming into play?
Yeah, I think about that time. I forget exactly what year, but about that time.
Yeah. Okay. And so when he's in New York and kind of down into Nashville, what's your relationship with him like now? Have you reconnected? Are you kind of tighter? You in more communication?
Yeah, we were more in touch. He was so busy in New York that we were rarely in touch. So once we got to Nashville, I heard a lot more from him. Yeah. I remember when he was still in New York, of course, he was living over in New Jersey. I had a business meeting up in New York City, and I decided, gee, I hadn't seen him for a while, so I'll get in touch with him.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, we'll meet. And I'm waiting in the city. We figured out a place we would meet, and I'm standing on the corner and waiting for him. And all of a sudden I hear, and of course it was busy. It may have even been very close to Times Square. All kind of noise, traffic, people. And I hear my nickname as a teenager was Crunch. Okay. The family never forgot it. And I hear this noise, yelling, it wasn't a noise, yelling Crunch. And I look down the street, he's like a half a block away. He had such a strong voice. Well, the darndest thing was, and we're sitting there in a restaurant, and it just dawned on me, we hadn't seen each other for 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. He may as well have been on the other side of the world during that time frame.
Sure.
So he was so busy. Matter of fact, he after our luncheon, he had a session date and took me to the studio with him.
Oh, cool. What session was it? Do you remember?
I don't remember who it was. All I do remember is they're starting, all the musicians are in the studio and practicing, and I hear him play a riff that I had no idea a bassist you could play that on a bass.
Yeah.
And it just blew me away. Of course, I thought he was showing off for me.
Nice. He needed to impress his brother.
Which reminds me of a story when he started doing a lot of work in Philly for Tom Bell, the producer. And Tom had a singer he was working with, and he told the singer, he said, "I got a new bass player for you." And the singer wasn't very happy to hear that. He said, "I don't know about that." Then in the studio, he hears Bob Babbitt sing a few notes. He says, "Oh yeah, this is going to work
out." That's great. That's great. I remember you told me, we talked about this on the phone, and I remember that your brother was interested in doing some writing and was writing a jingle or like commercial for the airline company you were working for. And I remember that's kind of a cool story because of how it all ties in with itself in a certain way. So tell that story. Tell the story about Bob.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he had gotten into doing jingles. I guess the session work, the recording session work slowed down a little bit, and he did quite a lot of jingles. He was actually writing and submitting jingles to companies. Okay. So he gives me a call and says, I'd like to do some commercials for your airline. How do I go about doing that?
Yeah.
I told him, I said, well, our ad agency does that. But I knew our director of advertising very well, close relationship, and our VP of sales and advertising I was working for had a good relationship. So I said, look, just do this. Here's the guy, send something to, and it was a director of advertising. And I said, by the way, my boss, the VP, loves the oldies, and so did I, and we kind of hit it off over how we both enjoyed talking about the oldies.
Yeah.
From the 60s. And so he sends I want to say at least three, maybe four jingles to the director of advertising, who calls me into his office to listen to. And I knew right away it was Bob.
Yeah.
And the 50s theme jingle was spot on.
Okay.
Right out of the 50s.
Yeah.
It was so cool. So the director takes the jingles, the tapes, to the VP. And it turns out a couple of days later, he calls me into his office to listen to them, even though I had heard them. And he says, you got to hear this. And he loved the jingle, the 50s jingle. Well, we could not use the advertising. But our senior VP heard that jingle and said, I have an idea. And decided to use that jingle, put lyrics to it about the airline, and do a dance routine, all of the Temptations at our annual marketing conference.
Okay.
The end of the conference, it was like the final act.
Yeah.
And the employees went absolutely berserk.
That's awesome.
And loved it so much. So the next year, the female staff members put together a routine and presented it at the annual marketing conference. And then the next year, it became a talent show. All of the employees performing different acts.
I love it.
It was just amazing, a blast, and it became done year after year after year.
Yeah, kind of a tradition.
Everybody looked forward to it. It was a real morale booster.
Yeah.
And just tied us together, and bonded the whole group.
Yeah, and after speaking with you and the few times we have, and speaking with Joe, Bob's son, just how big of a heart Bob had for people, and I love that his work maybe didn't get commercial attention, for the jingle, but kind of the spirit and the heart of Bob still came through and unified people and could cause people to dance and celebrate and have fun and kind of unite them in a certain way. Because everything I've learned about Bob from talking with you and Joe is he wasn't chasing limelight. He was in it for the integrity and doing right by people and working hard. And I like that airline story because I feel like so many of those same attributes come through in that story, about connecting people, and it didn't get outside attention, but the people who it affected them in a very kind of intense, for the lack of a better word, intense way. It really changed the dynamic of the people that were on the inside. And I think that, from what I've learned from speaking with you and Joe, like that was just the spirit of Bob Babbitt. And I think I like the correlation in that story.
It really had an effect on our employee group.
Yeah.
A very positive effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was pretty humble, laid back, and you're right, he wasn't looking for stardom. At one point, I remember his wife Ann telling me, I don't know exactly when this was, he said he felt like he hadn't accomplished anything.
Mm-hmm.
So he thought he hadn't accomplished anything, but he ended up with how many awards? He played on over 200 top 40 hits, which sold and won 25 gold and a couple of platinum awards. Was given a Lifetime Achievement Award from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And the mayor named that, proclaimed it Bob Babbitt Day.
Oh, what day is it? What day is Bob Babbitt Day?
I'm not sure what day it is. Sorry to say.
When I spoke with Joe on March 23rd, and March 23rd just coincidentally happened to be the anniversary of the last time Bob performed.
Okay.
On American Idol.
Oh, right.
And I've been trying to find the video of that. I'm sure Joe has it. I should email Joe. But I wanted to find the video of that. I haven't found it yet. But
it may even be on YouTube because I've seen it recently.
Okay.
Somewhere.
I was looking for it on YouTube, but then as soon as you type American Idol into YouTube, you get everybody who's ever auditioned in every season. So I'm still kind of sifting through looking for the performance with Bob. But I thought that was I liked how that kind of just happened to work out, that I got to speak with Joe on the kind of the anniversary of his last performance.
Cool.
Joe had mentioned some things like that too, about how Bob was feeling about himself and his career, and I know that was actually a big one for him to get recognized on television on American Idol. That's why I bring it up, actually.
Well, when Standing in the Shadows of Motown came out, of course, all the guys, the Funk Brothers, finally got recognition.
Sure.
And people knew them. But even before that, I have a couple of quotes that stick with me. One by Rick Seachild, who was a writer from Bass Player Magazine, who said that he says probably safe to say that 365 days a year, every minute of the day. I get choked up when I try to tell this story.
Yeah.
There's a song being played by Bob Babbitt, pumping out of the radio somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, he's touching somebody somewhere right now, even while we're talking now. You know, somebody's listening to him.
I Googled him, once in a while, just Google and see what pops up. And I was on Wikipedia and I find this story about a guy, a musician, composer by the name of Harris Fire, spelled F-Y-R-E. And Harris was a trombone player and he wrote some music. He partnered with a singer, a young lady, and they eventually became an item and married. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he decided to switch to the bass. And he tells the story on Wikipedia that Bob became his role model. Mm-hmm. He said, after all, you heard the guy every 15 minutes on the radio.
Yeah.
And he adopted a mantra for when he did a session.
Yeah.
And he said, I now baptize you in the name of the thunder, the song, and the holy grove. He said one of the groups he wrote for were the Sledge Sisters.
Okay.
Sister Sledge.
Sister Sledge, right? Yeah.
And he went to one of their first sessions to play the bass, and he said, it so happened there were two basses, and another. Mm-hmm. He was surprised that there were two basses, but that was not uncommon.
Sure.
And he said, well, the other bass player baptized better than he could. And of course, it turned out to be Bob.
Yeah.
So he said, there's good, there's better, and then there's Babbitt.
Yeah. Bob was underrated, I think, still, in the trajectory, not trajectory, in the history of the bass. I think he's known, but I think most people listen to a lot of that stuff and just assume it's Jamerson because
very true.
Because Jamerson is so attached, like when you think of Motown bass, like the first thing that pops up is Jamerson, mentally, And so I think most people just assume it's just, that's James Jamerson. It's Motown, it's Jamerson. And Bob played on so much great stuff that it's, and now, and like I've spoke with Joe, like I'll read printouts of things of like things people say that Bob has played on that is clearly not Bob, and I've talked to Joe about some of them. He had such a distinct style that you can just listen to it very easily and like almost right off the bat. There's a couple that would be difficult to tell. Some early Jamerson, when Jamerson wasn't playing a lot of notes yet, some of those might be confusing, but other than that, like Bob had such a specific sound, and I think and I know, like I've spoke with you, he was kind of all the other guys of that time period, Jamerson, Donald Duck Dunn, Tommy Cogbill, even David Hood, who I spoke with last week, down in Muscle Shoals. Bob was kind of like, he had a little bit of all of them. Like he could kind of do some of the Jamerson thing, but he was doing what Duck was doing. Tommy Cogbill was kind of like that, like David Hood had his own thing that was more along the lines of Duck Dunn. But Bob had just this really relaxed feel, and the feel is the signature in Bob's playing, just a really relaxed feel.
And that was, and he always said every once in a while he'd get interviewed and be asked what would he tell young bass players just learning, and he would say, "Don't overplay." Stay in the groove.
Yeah.
Satisfy your soul. You'll know in your heart and love your music. So that was his mantra. That's how he played, and that was his personality.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, and I think the time I've got to spend with you and Chuck, like really, you and Joe, really learning more about him as a person, and then going back and listening to him more. It's the connection between his personality and how he would interact with people, and kind of the character he would carry himself with, and all that. Like, it can all be heard in his playing. It's been really nice to go back and listen to him play again.
Over time, I felt that I got more familiar with his playing, despite my lack of musical talent, that I could recognize when he was playing.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, a new song would come out, and I'd say, "Man, that's got to be Bob."
Yeah.
And it was.
Yeah.
There were 3 songs that I remember so well that I thought I knew it had to be him. Were the Afternoon 11 by Engelbert Humperdinck.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Kenny Nolan did a couple of songs. He did a couple with Kenny. I Like Dreaming. And then one, I'm at the movie watching the movie Foul Play.
Foul Play.
I forget the stars, because it did at the time. But the theme song, and sung by Barry Manilow, is Ready to Take a Chance Again, which goes along with the movie's plot. And I'm at the movie and I say, "Oh my God, that sounds like Bob." Well, it was. And it got an Oscar nomination for that song.
I just looked it up. 1978. With Goldie Hawn, Chevy Chase, Dudley Moore.
I was going to say Chevy Chase, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know this movie.
Pretty good, cool movie. Good, enjoyable.
Okay, but Bob's on the Barry Manilow track.
Yeah.
That's kind of the single for the film.
Right.
Okay.
Came out as a single for them.
Interesting.
And he did several movie tracks.
Okay.
Well, or there were songs he played on.
Right, that would get used
in the movie.
Sure.
And then he worked early on in New York with Tim Curry quite a bit. Of course, what was it? Oh my gosh, what's the famous movie star that's always played at midnight? And folks come dressed up as characters in the movie.
Rocky Horror?
Yes, Rocky Horror Show. He played that soundtrack.
Okay.
And did a lot of sessions with Tim and performances, and actually wrote some songs for Tim that Tim recorded.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know about that part of his occupation.
Yeah, he composed some things.
When speaking with Joe, and I don't want to keep referencing that too much because I want people to just hear things from Joe, but when your father passed, that had a profound effect on Bob.
Yeah.
I mean, like it would the whole family, but because of the nature of that changed a lot of things for Bob. How did Bob ever speak to you about that?
Now, what you tell me? You said this. You're talking about when he got sick, or
when your father passed away.
Oh, our father passed away.
Yeah, when your father passed away, that had a really big impact on Bob.
Well, one of the issues, of course, that made that impact big, besides the fact of losing our father.
Sure.
He was only 51.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Our dad passed away on Bob's birthday.
Right. So, and that had a huge effect on Bob, that And Joe talks a little bit about that. Did Bob ever talk to you about that? Or how did you see Bob handle grief and, kind of deal with that loss? How did the family do? Did the family kind of bond closer together during this time?
Well,
I've also seen
I'm not sure. I can't say that I detected or saw any change in Bob. At the time, we had gotten a little bit older and started drifting, not apart,
sure,
but
just doing your own lives,
different worlds.
Yeah,
the year and a half in difference in our ages kind of had us both in different behavioral patterns with different crowds, different friends. So
right.
we weren't as close together as we were later, much closer later when I was up there in Detroit with him. But it affected us, or affected our life. We were forced to move out of our house into much less expensive housing on the other end of the town, of the city. So that part was physical, but also changed us in our behavior and our lives quite a bit. And our mother was a heroine. I mean, she went to work to support the family.
Oh, really? After your father passed, Mom was the breadwinner.
Yeah. And of course, Bob and I worked as much as we could, but.
How old was your mother when your father passed? Roughly. If your dad passed at 51, like what was the age difference between your parents?
Geez, great question. I'm not sure I've ever even thought about that. She would have been in her 40s. She was younger than he was.
Okay.
But not much younger. She was probably late 40s.
Okay. So maybe somewhere between 3 to 5 years, somewhere in there.
No more than that, yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. And then what was she doing as a job to support the family?
She was working as a nanny for her family. I remember it being that one of her jobs, or doing house cleaning. Okay. Then she got a steady job at the grade school near where we lived as a teacher's assistant.
Okay.
So she's always doing something.
Sure.
Always working.
Yeah.
And she was doing her Hungarian music thing as well at the time.
Right.
She became a MC and DJ at that radio station. The radio station we used to race music. Yeah. Because they had nationality programs. They had a weekly Hungarian Day program on a Sunday. She and her good friend, the piano player, would host that program and play Hungarian music, and every once in a while she would sing and her friend would play the piano and back her up.
Nice.
Anyway, she kept very busy. It was amazing.
Was there a big Hungarian was there a big Hungarian population there?
I don't know how big it was, but there definitely was a Hungarian population.
I mean, it seems like there'd have to be enough to have a radio program dedicated to the culture.
Right. And in fact, the church, the neighborhood we moved to had a Hungarian Presbyterian church we attended.
Okay.
So there were a lot of Hungarian people in that area and a Hungarian club. There were a few around the city, and one of them was right there in that neighborhood.
Okay.
We didn't go there very much.
To the church?
If it goes to your question, there was definitely a Hungarian population.
Right.
In that area.
Was spirituality or religion, or however anybody would want to think about, was that a part of your childhood? Did you guys attend church regularly or on cultural? Okay.
Yeah. And to this day, how many years later, I say the bedtime prayers my mother taught us.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Have you passed them on to your children?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Have you passed those same prayers on to your children?
Interestingly, I haven't, and neither did my wife.
Okay.
We weren't agnostic. We were just
just didn't happen. Is your wife Hungarian?
Oh no, she's Scottish.
Okay.
For her background, yeah.
Yeah.
She's Scottish.
Okay. So then, growing up, I'm kind of fascinated by the Hungarian thing. Did you have a lot of Hungarian peers? Like when you guys were, maybe you and Bob being like 6, 7 neighborhood friends, were they Hungarian? Did you get to share that?
I don't remember any of them being Hungarian.
Okay.
And even in my lifetime during my career, I don't remember meeting any Hungarian work associates.
Yeah. That doesn't seem like a culture from any place I've lived, by the way, that really bands together the way other cultures kind of band together. With like kind of all congregating in specific parts of the city and stuff like that. I've never known Hungarian. Like I've known some people who honestly, I don't know if I've known anybody who's full Hungarian. I know some people that are part, but it's an interesting culture. It's interesting to me because I don't know that much about it.
Bob recorded a CD of songs, and he titled the CD "Gypsy from Jupiter."
Okay.
He got that title from an article written by a Hungarian guy, and he titled his article "Gypsy from Jupiter."
Oh.
And his article was about how strange the language is, how difficult if you want to try to learn it. In fact, our mother never taught us the language. One of the big reasons was that she didn't speak English when she started grade school, first grade.
Okay.
Her parents were both Hungarian. That's all they ever spoke.
Yeah.
So when she got to school, she had the toughest time because she couldn't speak English. So that's the reason she wouldn't teach us Hungarian, despite playing all Hungarian music. She wanted us to know English when we got to school.
Sure. Is that something that your brother was proud of necessarily? Was he? I mean, because he's not. You guys aren't. Obviously, you're not 100% Hungarian. You're Hungarian and Slavic. So was there a culture that Bob identified with more between your mother and father? Did he, or was it kind of just not an issue to him and he was going about his business?
Well, we identified with Hungarian more because my father, despite he was being from Slovakia, his family lived just across the border from Hungary, and he spoke Hungarian.
Okay, so there's a big Hungarian presence.
Yeah. And if they didn't want, mom and dad didn't want us to know what they were talking about,
how old did you ever catch on? Did you ever learn the language to catch on to see if mom and dad are complaining about you guys?
I learned a couple words, but I couldn't understand anything.
That's a good. I think all parents should have another language. Like all parents should. Soon as parents have children, they should learn another language, just so that they can talk in front of their children without traumatizing the children. Right. Oh man.
I would tell you, by the way, that we talked earlier about how strange my father's name was.
Yeah.
It's a rocky name, and it was pronounced Kreinar.
Yeah.
And I guess I told one of my work associates about my background. We were talking about our backgrounds, and that my father's name was Kreinar. Well, they dubbed me Kreinar.
It's come full circle. It's come full circle.
I'd call him on the phone and they'd answer, Kreinar.
That's funny. You got Kreinak, he got Babbitt. You guys are everybody's grabbing a different last name here. Yeah. Joe told me about that. He was able to tell me how the last name kind of evolved just from nicknames. At what point did it start to make that it wasn't weird to call your brother by a different last name? Or like at what point did you remember reading it and you're like, oh yeah, that's Bob, and you started to get used to it?
I don't think I started using Babbitt really a lot regularly until the Motown was with Motown and the documentary came out.
Okay.
And it became publicly known as Babbitt.
Yeah.
I went to meet him. He and the Funk Brothers came to D.C. I think it was National African American Month, and they met with President George Bush.
Okay.
And so I met him at the airport when he was going back to Detroit. We were sitting in a small little restaurant bar, like 4 or 5 seats, and waiting for the flight. And one of the Northwest employees comes by and introduces himself. He says, "Hello, Mr. Babbitt. Nice meeting you."
Yeah.
I think what happened, and by the way, when he goes through security, the security guard says, "We know who you are." I think apparently anybody who's visiting the president, their names are given to
sure,
security.
Yeah, they're deeply
they
checked out.
What airline they're going to be a passenger on, so they notify.
Sure. That's funny. Yeah. Cool, man. Any parting stories that you have? What are some of your favorite stories of either Bob in his childhood or Bob as a professional? Or what are some that you still hold on really close? I know through talking with you that you still get emotional when you listen to him play and when you hear him play, specifically the solo on Scorpio. That still means a lot to you.
Yeah, it's still played. It's still. I love reading the comments when. One of his son Joe, is managing his Facebook fan page, and when he posts a song, it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I go to YouTube and I love reading the comments.
Yeah.
But the comments are going to be about the group mostly, but every once in a while, people know who the bass player was, or they even ask, or they think it's Jamerson, and somebody comes on and corrects them and says, "No, it's Babbitt."
There's a lot of cool.
A couple of stories. Well, he did. Of course, the Bass Player magazine did 2 transcripts. One of Scorpio. They published a transcript, and then they came to Georgia.
Okay.
I don't know if they've done more than 1 transcript for any bass player. They probably have. But they had an article back in, I want to say 94. I know it's 94 because I'm looking at the notes. I have a copy of it. That was about Gene Simmons. I think Gene gave a couple of opinions that Bob didn't agree with. He agreed with some of it, but he wrote a letter. Bob wrote a letter to the editor, and he said he had to ask how Gene could say Motown was just felt moving around, but you didn't know what it was. To this day, Bob says one of the best sounds of their history is the sound of Motown bass. He will describe it a little more. But he says, although I agree with a few of the things Gene had to say, my overall reaction after reading this tough guy, rich kid, our trip comments that although I have not wrestled for years, I would like to turn him upside down by his ankles and make him a pile driver.
Yeah. All right. I never knew that. I never had heard of that letter or anything to the article, to the magazine.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And I like the story. Actually, Joe told me the story about when he was on the road with other musicians. I didn't get the details where, when, who he was playing for. But he and the drummer, was it Collins? His last name's Collins. I believe he's the drummer. They go back to the hotel and they want to, it was late.
Phil Collins?
I'm sorry?
Was it Phil Collins?
No, not Phil.
Oh.
Not Phil. Another musician, but not Phil. And it was before that.
Okay.
They were starved and they wanted to have good steak. And they called a restaurant because there wasn't much anything open, but it's late. And a guy comes over, he delivers the meal to them. And they specified they wanted steak. And the guy comes over with a tray of food and their sandwiches. Ham sandwiches.
Yeah.
So
not at all steak.
They were so angry. They were sitting out at the pool, by the way. And the deliverer found where they were. And he went out to the pool to deliver that meal. And when they saw it, they picked him up along with the food and threw him in the pool. The guy in the food goes flying into the pool.
Did they ever get the steak?
No. I don't know if they got anything.
Bummer. They didn't even get the ham sandwiches. It was a drag.
Anyway.
Chuck, thank you so much for reaching out and connecting with me. And because you reached out to me, I was also able to spend a couple, I don't even know how many times we've been on the phone now, but a few phone conversations that have all been lovely. I've gotten to connect with Joe. Thank you so much. This has been a real treat for me. I appreciate you.
Right. It's my pleasure. A treat for me too.
Oh, cool.
I thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's my pleasure. This is a big deal. Bob is an important figure in bass, and a bass player that's very special to me. And this means a lot to me to connect with both you and Joe. So thank you. Well, thank you so much.
I really appreciate your recognition and not promoting, but publicizing his talent.
Sure. Yeah. My pleasure. All right, that was my talk with Bob Babbitt's brother. There's so many B's there. Bob Babbitt's brother, Chuck Kreinar. That was my talk with Chuck Kreinar. Man, that's fantastic. I love hearing those old stories. I love the one with Stevie. That's funny. And from all the books I've read about Stevie, actually not books, book. I'm still working through a book about Stevie, actually. Stevie's always kind of a prankster. And I can only imagine that there was a lot of joking around like that with Bob and Stevie on the road. Stay tuned for the next episode where we will hear from Bob's son, Joe Kreinar. But again, I cannot thank Chuck enough for contacting me, for being willing to do this. For just all of it. This was a huge treat for me. After talking with Chuck on the phone initially and then talking with Joe and doing the interviews with Chuck. It's fantastic. Great stories. And thank you again, Chuck, so much for taking the time to do this. Stick around for the next fun. You can follow me online at facebook.com/The Bass Shed, Instagram at The Bass Shed, Twitter at Bass Shed. Go to thebasshed.com, sign up for the newsletter. And I think that's all the not so shameless plugs I have for the end of this. I think those are just shameful, is what I think. I think those I should feel shame. I should feel shame. That's all I got, folks. I will catch you on the next one, and stay tuned for Joe Kreinar in a minute.